Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. O.J. Simpson refuses to pay how much the juice still owes to the families of his slain ex-wife and her boyfriend, and why the case is still being litigated in court. Convicted wife killer Scott Peterson remains on death row after his death sentence was thrown out. But will Peterson get a new trial for the murders of his wife and unborn son?
He is anxious to get back into court.
Robert's Durst friends testify against him in court, the millionaire on trial for his best friend's murder, and why the judge who presided over Durst's first murder trial is speaking out.
All three of these deaths are so connected.
Law and Crime Daily, covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmire along with Terry Austin. O.J. Simpson may be a free man living in Las Vegas, but he's still fighting legal battles in the courts. Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy is here with Simpson's latest effort to keep from paying a judgment in a decades-old wrongful death case. Anjanette?
Yeah, Brian, a jury found O.J. Simpson liable for the deaths of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ron Goldman, decades ago. He was ordered to pay $33.5 million, but to date, he hasn't paid a cent. Now, the Goldman and the Brown families, particularly Ron Goldman's father, Fred, have fought for years to get Simpson to pay, and he has avoided doing so. Now the families are in court in Nevada asking that any settlement Simpson may have received from a hotel be given to the families. Simpson sued the Cosmopolitan Hotel for defamation in 2019, claiming that the hotel employees made defamatory comments about him to a website after an incident at the hotel. The case was resolved earlier this year, although it's not known whether the hotel paid Simpson any money at all. Simpson, as you know, has claimed he's innocent of the murders and was acquitted in his criminal trial, but it was a much different outcome in the civil case.
In the civil trial, it became even clearer that O.J. Simpson absolutely did it. The fact that there were these very unique shoes, these Bruno Magli shoes, very large size, that were in bloody footprints at the crime scene. And O.J. Simpson, in the civil case, said, I never would have worn those ugly shoes. And yet, lo and behold, they find a Buffalo Bills newsletter from 9 months before the murder. And there's O.J. wearing the ugly shoes. There is nothing more incriminating than that.
Now, Simpson's attorney has filed documents with the court saying that he will appeal any order that says that Simpson is required to pay out any money, whether it's from a hotel settlement or anything else. He plans to go to the Nevada Supreme Court if needed, and the amount of the judgment has actually ballooned over the years to $60 million. Brian?
Thanks, Anjanette. Joining us today is legal analyst Dina Dahl and Terry Austin. Dina, as I look at these cases, it brings a whole new meaning to, is the juice worth the squeeze? If they can't get the money from O.J., then how are the courts going to get it out of him?
Well, they're going to have to just keep trying. And I think this is not unique to the O.J. case. In any civil suit, it is up to the person to go after the person for the money versus these liens. And that takes a lot of money in itself, going to court over and over and over. But that's what the Goldman family has to do, because anytime O.J. Simpson may have money, they have to try to go to court, get a lien against it, take this kind of action. And so it shows really the diligence of the family that they continue to go after it, even though right now there doesn't apparently be any money and possibly some from this judgment, but nowhere close to where the settlement amount is.
Yeah, and they did a similar action when he came out with his book, If I Did It, and that maybe got a little bit more traction. Terry, do any of O.J.'s arguments for not paying make sense to you, or is this just one big stall tactic?
I think it's a stall tactic because they're avoiding payments, and they've been doing this for almost 25 years. The original award for the wrongful death of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, that was back in 1997. Then in 2000, we saw that O.J. moved to Florida because he wanted to avoid paying that judgment. And now that we might have this settlement for this defamation suit, We're seeing that his lawyers are refusing to pay. They are refusing to even say what the amount was on that settlement, claiming that it's confidential. So I think it is a stall tactic, and I think we're going to be seeing this for a very long time.
Makes sense. And Jeanette, have the Goldmans and Browns ever received any money in the settlement?
Nothing that amounts to anything, Brian. You mentioned If I Did It. That was the book that many people regard as O.J. Simpson, basically a confession from O.J. Simpson. He wrote that back in 2006. The Goldman and Brown families protested when that book was going to come out. O.J. Simpson had received an advance for that. Then the Goldmans got the rights to the book and actually had it published themselves. The Brown family was very upset about that. There's now a rift. So If I Did It and a little bit of extra other money is really all they've ever gotten, nowhere near $60 million.
All right, we'll see how this continued battle goes for O.J. Simpson paying off these settlements. Thank you all. Now to Colorado, where a jury has been selected in the trial of a father accused of murdering his 13-year-old son. Dylan Redwine vanished over Thanksgiving weekend in 2012. In 2017, a grand jury indicted Mark Redwine for second-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death. According to court documents, Dylan reportedly found compromising photos of his father, including him wearing women's clothing and eating feces from a diaper he was wearing. Be sure to tune into Law&Crime Network for Gavel Gavel coverage. And in California, a judge is denying bail for a man accused of killing a child during a road rage shooting. Prosecutors say Marcus Anthony Erez is a complete danger to the community. Erez is charged with firing the shot that killed 6-year-old Aiden Leos as his mother drove him to kindergarten last month. The California Highway Patrol says Erez fired a gun from his white Volkswagen as his girlfriend, Wynn Lee, drove along the freeway in Orange County. Lee is now being held on $500,000 bail. And in New Mexico, a man has been arrested and charged with the murder of his wife, who has been missing for more than 2 years. Dane Kalungi was taken into custody in New Mexico after he tried to get into Kirtland Air Force Base. He is charged with first-degree murder of his wife, Jepsia Maga Kalungi, who has disappeared in March 2019. The two met online and fell in love, which prompted Jepsi to move to the United States from the Philippines in 2017. They were married that same year in July. Jepsi's mother told a local news outlet that Kalungi told her that he thought his wife was going to the Philippines, Mexico, or Chicago to visit her friends. Still ahead on Law&Crime Daily, what's next for convicted wife killer Scott Peterson? But first, inside the courtroom for the Robert Durst trial, why friends of the millionaire real estate heir are being called to testify against him. The testimony you won't want to miss. Next. Welcome back. The state of California versus Robert Durst trial is continuing with video testimony from a longtime friend of the millionaire real estate heir. Durst is accused of murdering his best friend Susan Berman in December 2000. Prosecutors say Durst believed Berman threatened to go to the authorities with information about Durst's missing wife, Kathy. Emily Altman's husband worked for Durst as an attorney when he was arrested in 2001 for the death of his neighbor, Morris Black. Durst was acquitted of Black's murder, but later pled guilty in connection to chopping up Black's body. On direct examination, Altman found it difficult to admit that she would want Durst to be found guilty if he had committed this crime. She even got emotional when asked about her friendship with Bob Durst.
As you sit here, would you agree that Robert Durst is one of your oldest, dearest friends? So again, if you could please answer this question I'm asking. If he did what he's accused of, do you want him to be convicted?
If he's proven to do what you're accusing him of, then I guess he has to be found guilty.
The pre-recorded testimony from Altman continued in court, where prosecutor John Lewin questioned her if she asked her friend Bob Durst what happened that night that Kathy disappeared.
And you're saying that you would not have wanted to ask him the personal question in trying to help him, hey, what happened that night?
No, I didn't ask him what happened that night. First you asked me something about, I wish I had your other question, but no, I didn't ask him. That's just not me, okay? I asked him if he could help. I asked him if he knew where she was, but no, I don't do those kind of things. I don't ask those things. I don't ask invasive questions of people. So,
Judge Susan Chris presided over the Texas trial for the death of Morris Black. She spoke to Law&Crime about why Altman's testimony is so important.
While Durst was in jail in Pennsylvania and having recorded calls with Stewart and Emily all the time, Stewart did a favor for Bob. He went to New Orleans and he took care of something. He removed something and he took care of it. And Bob bought a fancy car for them. I can't remember if it was a Lexus or a Cadillac, but it was some very expensive car that Stewart wanted. And after the task was done, the car was bought. But there were so many things that he said that were incriminating and that showed consciousness of guilt and a desire to fool the jury. And he practiced testimony. He had cassette tapes that he practiced his testimony on and gave to the Altmans to let them go listen so they could decide whether or not he sounded convincing and whether he should change his story. And I believe his wife might have listened to them too. And he bought a book about jury psychology, and he did so much to prepare. And at one point, he told his wife during those tapes to go watch the movie Primal Fear, where someone pretended to be crazy and killed someone. And he was thinking about basing his defense on that movie.
Back with us is legal analyst Dina Dahl and Terry Austin. Terry, another witness being questioned about whether or not they would have asked a question and if they remember that question at all. Do you think Lewin is getting what he needs out of Altman?
I do think Lewin has made some points with Altman, and one of the points that he made with her is the fact that she is extremely loyal to Durst, no matter what. I mean, he established the fact that Altman had Durst become the godfather of her son even after Kathy disappeared in 1982, even after Berman's murder in December of 2000, and even after Black's death, which she knew about, and the dismemberment in September of 2001. So even after all of those events, Altman still made Durst the godfather. And the other substantive point I think that was made here is the fact that Lewin was able to establish that Durst was in California at the time of Berman's death, and he established that through Altman. So he's made some points here.
Now, Dina, a lot of these questions are asking what is Durst's state of mind. But do you think Durst will be able to testify his way out of another conviction if he takes the stand?
I don't think so. I mean, he obviously did a great job of testifying in Texas and not getting the conviction of a murder charge. But it's kind of like third time a charm for anybody who wants a conviction here. How many times can you talk yourself out of a really bad situation? Plus, we have all this testimony he gave during the documentary, and we know public opinion then was very much against it. Here, the prosecution has a chance to put on a very methodical case, which they are. They're going to include the documentary evidence. I don't see how he's going to talk his way out of this unless there's something clear out of the blue sky that we just haven't seen yet.
We'll see. The defense has already said that Durst is going to take the stand, and I'm sure that Lewin is waiting for that day. We'll continue with that coverage and talk more about that case in just a moment. Coming up on Law&Crime Daily, why Scott Peterson is feeling anxious as a judge decides if he'll get a new trial. Plus, more on the Robert Durst trial. Could the last words the victim told her hairstylist about her best friend be a major clue? Find out ahead. Back now to our continuing coverage of the Robert Durst trial. Victim Susan Berman's hairstylist took the stand to say she was financially strapped before she died, but was expecting money from her dear friend Bobby.
There came a point where she could not pay me, but I told her not to worry, that when she got up on her feet and was working again, she could start paying me again.
How long of a period approximately was it where you were
not being paid?
Yeah, I'm sure. Do you remember?
Well, it was a few years.
I'm sorry?
It was a few years. I wasn't getting paid. And she would say to me, you know, I'm expecting a check from Bobby, and I'll give you some money as soon as I get that.
You remember her telling you that the money wasn't coming fast enough from Bobby?
Yeah,
And that was in this last discussion you had with her.
yes.
When she was saying that, the money's not coming fast enough from Bobby, what was her demeanor like? Was it normal? Was it different?
The laughs were gone. I mean, I could tell she was under a lot of stress. She was very upset, and she didn't know where she was going to get her rent money and things like that.
All right, let's bring in legal analyst Dina Dahl and co-host Terry Austin. Terry, a down-and-out Susan Berman gets help from Durst in exchange for a favor. Could this be Berman's motive that the prosecution is looking for to tie it all together?
Absolutely. You know, money is always a good motive behind a murder. Actually, there's no good motive for a murder, but money is usually behind it. And there are two viable motives here. One is that Durst did not want to continue paying Berman. But the other motive that I think Lewin and the prosecution altogether are making a good point at is the fact that clearly Durst wanted to silence Berman and not have her talk about what she knew as far as Kathy's death was concerned. So I think these combined motives of money and this secret that Durst wanted to keep was good.
Now, Dina, the prosecution's case is being built on one motive on top of another. Is the complexity of this case, do you think, going to help or hurt the prosecution?
I think it's going to help. I mean, it is a little bit of a long, drawn-out process, but it's also fascinating. I imagine the jury is right there with the prosecution. They build so many blocks. It becomes that even if you have doubt, how can it be reasonable doubt? He's connected to so many disappearances and murder. Plus, we know he's going to be admitting to the fact that he wrote the note. So he was there at the time that she was dead.
Absolutely. Thank you both. When we come back, the legal hurdles in the Scott Peterson case, when the convicted wife killer will be resentenced, and whether he might get a new trial. Everything you need to know next. Welcome back. Scott Peterson's hoping for a new trial in the deaths of his wife Lacey and their unborn son. Law&Crime's Anjanette Levy is back with the latest in this 18-year-old saga.
Yeah, Brian, Scott Peterson was on death row for the deaths of his wife Lacey Peterson and their son Connor, who had not yet been born. But an appellate court found that there were errors in the original sentencing and that Peterson should be resentenced. Now, the Stanislaus County District Attorney, she could have pursued the death penalty yet again, but decided not to this time around after meeting with Lacey Peterson's family. So when Peterson is resentenced, he will automatically be sentenced to life without parole. But there's still the issue about whether Peterson will get an entirely new trial. Peterson claims juror Rochelle Neese, nicknamed Strawberry Shortcake by the media, came into deliberations with a clear agenda to convict Peterson.
And we feel very strongly that under the law, Scott Peterson, like any defendant, he has the right to 12 independent jurors, each one independent. And even if one of them has a prejudged notion and has decided ahead of time what decision they're going to make, even if it's only one, that's enough to overturn. And I believe that's what we have here. But obviously that'll be up to the judge to decide.
Now, that was attorney Pat Harris. He is now representing Scott Peterson. He was actually part of the original defense team back in 2002, 2003, 2004, when Scott Peterson was charged with the murders. And he is going to be representing Peterson at taxpayers' expense. The public defender's office typically would have been doing that, but that office has a conflict. Brian?
Thank you. And Jeanette, we're expecting some more news this week from Peterson's legal team, right?
Yeah, it relates to that issue with the alleged juror misconduct. Peterson's appellate team had filed what's called a writ of habeas corpus, and they are expected by Thursday to file some documents related to that juror misconduct issue with the court.
Now, Dina, August 25th will be a big day for Peterson, but it looks like evidentiary hearing or retrial. So is this a good place for the Peterson team?
It's a great place because everybody would want to have a chance to get it overturned. And that's what's happening here. Most likely, my guess is that if the judge does think that the court filings has some sort of merit, she's going to ask for an evidentiary hearing, and we may hear from the juror. I do not see her granting him a new trial just based on filing alone.
Yeah, we'll see how that hearing goes. Of course, we'll have it covered for you here at Law and Crime. And Terry, judges can never really reveal what they're thinking with these decisions, but they're humans, just like the rest of us, and sometimes can give little subtle clues as to where they're leaning. Where do you think this judge is leaning in this decision?
Well, actually, Brian, I just think based on what she said that she might be leaning towards granting a new trial. I mean, she's willing to listen to the evidence. She said that if the habeas corpus petition is strong enough and it might merit a new trial, she would do that. She said if she's not convinced on that she's going to request an evidentiary hearing, which means she wants more information, and that would include witnesses testifying. So she wants to hear the evidence, and she wants to make sure she's making the right decision. I don't think she's going to come to any snap decision. So I think we're going to be seeing evidence and listening to this petition one way or the other. I will say this. She also said that she thought Scott Peterson needs to come to the hearing, to be there in person, and that COVID is not an issue right now. So I think she wants to see Peterson himself and read his body language and make a decision based on all the evidence and also based on Scott Peterson himself.
Yeah, Terry, that last point was the one that kind of raised an eyebrow for me, because usually a judge wants the defendant there when major decisions are going to be made. And so I was thinking, is this just COVID getting better, or are you going to make a major decision? I don't know. But thank you all for contributing, and thank you for joining us here at Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.